from New York, it's Pardon My Disruption.
How you doing? This is Alan Berkson. I am the Director of Community Outreach for, you get that? No.
Too much
Too
glare.
much light. Can't even get it. That's terrible. I'm the Director of Community Outreach for Freshworks. Fresh Desk is now Freshworks, and I'm joined as always by the Dr. Disruptive, Jonathan Yarmis. Welcome, Doctor.
Thanks, Alan.
We are broadcasting live from beautiful downtown NYC.
New beginning.
A new home. We are actually excited to be broadcasting from the offices of Enterprise Technology VC Workbench.
We're here for two reasons. One, obviously, we've talked for some time about taking this show to the next level, and we think Workbench represents a potential partnership that will enable us to do that. More pragmatically, the Stanford Innovation Center is no more. The city and state and private partnership has fallen victim to a whole bunch of things, self-inflicted politics, and the bottom line, while Stanford remains an interesting technology place with some co-working places and so on, there's no longer a Stanford Innovation Center, so we were compelled to find a new home. Necessity being the mother of invention.
I was going to say, when one door closes, another door opens. So we're got a lot to talk about this month.
We always do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess most recently, maybe what didn't really happen at the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference.
You don't think the breathtaking announcements, iOS 11 now has a file system.
So basically they caught up to DOS.
Yeah, or the Apple II OS.
Right.
Yes. It's a big deal, and I'm sure within a few months there will be those people who say Apple invented file systems for mobile devices. But yes, a long overdue catch-up item. Of more note, and I'd say even significant note, we've talked about augmented reality for quite a while, and it's one of those disruptive technologies I identified going back on 4 years ago now that was going to be part of the next wave of innovation that shaped the next generation of technology disruption. And for a long time we've had limited applications of augmented reality. At the high end, always the example was the first down line on the football screen.
Right.
More recently, Pokemon Go, which was all the rage for a period of time, was perhaps the first mainstream augmented reality application. To do that, however, required a massive development effort on the part of Nintendo to, in effect, write an augmented reality engine on top of which they were able to build their application. And things like this are always seminal moments in the adoption of a new technology when a player comes in and comes out with a set of frameworks and tools that enable the much easier development of augmented reality applications. And Apple, while in many ways it has been behind this train, with the release of its AR kit, making it much easier for developers to write augmented reality applications, Apple stands a reasonable likelihood of closing the competitive gap, if not leapfrogging players at the very least, causing others the imperative to get out there and release their kits and court their developers quickly.
Well, I think that the thing to look for is, historically, Apple has been good at taking that leap, going from an MP3 player to an iPod, going from a BlackBerry to a real smartphone. They've been able to, but in the last few years, that type of it seems to be missing. I think that this is an opportunity that Apple has, but do they actually have the ability to execute on it at this point?
Yeah, which brings us perhaps to the HomePod, which, I hate the name,
well,
but aside from hating the name,
being fourth to market is great.
yeah, but therein lies a challenge. Being fourth to market isn't bad if the first three suck, and you're able to look and say, here are the things that are keeping them from mainstream adoption because their technology is so bad that we, Apple, with our usual fit and polish, can come in, release something to market that will captivate the market.
Well, here's the question for you, Doctor. What is the killer app for this market? Because it's not playing music. I can play music on my phone. It's not turning my lights on and off as much as you like to do that. Amazon lets me buy things directly. Okay, and there's a whole lot more I can buy from Amazon than I can buy from Apple. So what do you think is the killer app in this space? Is it, a better AI? Is it?
I'm not so sure it's a killer app per se as the complete transformation of the user interface. The man-machine interface for a long period of time has been a keyboard, and with the shrinking of devices, we reduced the size of the keyboard and created all sorts of issues. There are still people who lament the disappearance of BlackBerry because they had their keyboard on there.
Now my ex-partner in my IT business, he still has his BlackBerry because he wants to have his keyboard, and he has admitted that he never uses the keyboard, even though he has it.
But I think the transformation of the interface and also the always-on nature of things. This is, in fact, one of the things that I've criticized Microsoft for a long period of time. We've gotten more and more and more and more and more powerful computers, Moore's Law. And if you look, what are we doing with the processor? To capitalize on all of that power. And for the most part, to get kind of geeky technical on you, the processor is executing no ops. That means no operation. It's like, okay, give me something to do. Give me something to do. Give me something to do.
Yep.
We had an operating system that in the background, when I was writing a Word document, this is one of I thought would be the killer function utility for Word.
Wait, I thought that your background operation was searching for extraterrestrial life.
Yes, yeah, and that is true. Okay. I was consuming background cycles with something called SETI,
yes.
At Cal Berkeley that searched for extraterrestrial intelligence.
But getting back to
you're going to give me a distraction.
Because we shouldn't get sidetracked, because that never happens on this show.
Yeah, but so, what could have been doing while I'm writing a word processor, sometimes when I pause at the keyboard, it's because I walked away or I'm doing something else. Sometimes it's because I'm thinking, well, what was that quote? Or what, bring up something contextual, and why didn't the word processor in the background say, let me do things that anticipate what you're doing and bring up relevant information?
Contextual. I just wrote it on my paper with the pen and a paper as opposed to, but that is the word. And you've said this on the show before, which is, tell me something I don't know.
Right.
That will help me.
Yes.
You have a lot of information. You have data. You have historical data. You have real-time data. Tell me something I don't know or I haven't thought of that's going to help me.
Or I'm
make
trying
me happier,
to come up with.
improve. Yeah, right.
I mean, how many times?
Anticipate.
Wouldn't it be great when these devices, you go, God, what was the name of that movie? You remember the one with Kevin Costner and it was baseball? And your device goes, that was Field of Dreams. And this isn't science fiction at all.
It wasn't the other one with
Waterworld?
No. The other baseball. He plays the catcher.
Where's our QED? Yeah.
No, he with
demonstratum or whatever.
Yeah.
But yes, we're getting in that direction. And that I think is why these things are so huge and so important. And for Apple, why in some ways the HomePod is a necessary but late entrant into the marketplace, because we're going from a world where we had a device-centric computing environment where, on the back end, we're talking about IoT, Internet of Things, where everything is connected. But we're also using that to create a world where it's always listening. And how can it deliver value from an always listening perspective?
So we have this phrase, we say we use a computer. But it shouldn't be that way. It should be that there is an ambient computing happening that jumps in when we ask it, but also jumps in when it thinks we need something.
Yes. And it's going to be both valuable to us, but also creepy is one word, intrusive is another, because what happens when marketers get a hold of this? There is already some suspicion, some strong suspicion, that these devices which have microphones, which ostensibly aren't really listening unless you invoke them,
right,
are actually listening.
Wait. Alexa.
You're trying to mess with everybody.
Hey, Siri.
No, even better than that. Ivory soap. Let's talk about ivory soap.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And start to notice, repeat after us. Say at home there, ivory soap.
Everybody say ivory soap.
Yeah, we'll pause and wait. You too. I'm waiting.
No, this one hasn't said it
yet. Yeah. Go ahead, say it.
Okay.
And watch to see if somewhere in your feed on Facebook or some other advertising mechanism in the next couple of days.
On Facebook, on Twitter, on something.
You see an ad for ivory soap. And you'll wonder, how did it know that? I didn't Google it. I didn't do anything related to keyboard. But its ambient listening knew you were talking about it.
All right, so on a creepy factor, on a scale of 1 to 10, that's about an 11.
It's an 11 or a 0. It's trying to help me. I've expressed an interest in a product.
Right, so that's the ambient community. I mean, you said that also a lot on the show. You're willing to share your information as long as you use it for our mutual benefit.
Yes. For my benefit, whether it's
for my benefit,
yes,
right.
Whether it's your benefit,
right.
If you don't benefit from it all, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it.
Right. But you said so. That's and look, there are. I hear this arguments all the time. Oh, I don't want my data tracked. I turn on my privacy. I've got my private browser. That ship has sailed.
Yeah.
There is no. You have an illusion of privacy. You have this illusion that you can protect stuff. You have this. I mean, we've talked about them pointing, sound, getting sound waves off windows. So that's gone. So now the question becomes how as vendors or as technologists can we get benefit out of the fact that information is out there?
Yes, either that or we ought to start a real estate development effort where people live in Faraday cages. Which will give you a reasonable degree.
All right, everybody say Faraday cage. Faraday cage.
But we laugh, but that is going to happen in the next couple of years. That we'll say it here in our broadcast, and we'll have some device where we can tap and push something, a reference, a Wikipedia page, or what have you. So that to me is why these devices are so interesting. It's because it's transforming not only the user interface, but extending the experience to everything.
So we talked about Apple. They talk about the big four: Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google. So Google also,
and maybe Netflix.
only because they use a lot of bandwidth.
Well, no, the reason why I mention it, I was just reading something I believe this morning that was saying that a lot of stock pickers, the ones who have done well, are the ones who have bet on those 5 this year.
Okay. But Google also had
its developer
conference. Compare and contrast. I mean, they do have different ways of looking at technology and also how they deliver products to market.
Yes, Google isn't nearly the marketing machine Apple is. So you know that Apple had its Worldwide Developers Conference. There were live remotes from there and breathless reporters saying there's a file system, followed by 37,000 tweets about it. Whereas Google I/O doesn't get nearly the attention.
Now, I'm just going to pause there for a second. Not that I want to interrupt. Well, yeah, I do. The way you use number of tweets as a measure of popularity.
3.6 million yesterday during the Comey testimony.
So
it is a metric.
As much as Twitter is maligned, as we malign it, we do because of its poor user interface and poor out-of-the-box experience and all that kind of stuff.
And poor monetization,
and
because the fact that it was popular, did that net Twitter in the way of revenue?
Right, but so we'll talk a little bit more later, but continue.
Yeah.
So there was nobody tweeting about the Google I/O event. Well, there were like 3 people.
But yeah, probably. But
no, that's because all the activity was on Google Plus.
Hey, I posted about this show. Maybe some of the people watching found out about it.
Can I tell you the only thing that I know about Google Plus is when you mention my name on a post about this show. That's the only time I ever think of Google Plus.
And the only time I use it is when I post about this show.
So if you post on Google Plus and there's nobody there to read it, have you really posted?
Yeah, but when I do post, I bring up the page and I notice there are other people posting. It's not like,
Yeah, but they're probably doing the same thing. They're doing other conversations. They're probably doing the same thing you're doing. It's like, oh yeah, I want to broadcast it on as many channels as I can. So Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. Oh yeah, Google Plus. Yeah, why not?
Well, for what it's worth, I would say that is the problem with several of the social platforms these days, that the social nature of the social platforms has gone down. Twitter used to be a great place to have conversations, and I think Twitter's epitaph may well be it became a broadcasting medium, where you say something and hello, I used to think of it as a contextual search engine. I'd ask questions and people who knew some context about me responded with an appropriate answer.
And you would get that. You would get half a dozen answers really quickly.
Yeah. Now, almost not at all, because there's so much broadcast noise on it.
Right.
That there isn't a conversation. But that's
another topic. Okay.
Yeah.
Continue.
But Google I/O, doing a couple of things. One. And this is something where, when it first popped up on one of my emails, and the very first time I saw it was something my daughter sent me. And at the bottom of the email, there were 3 boxes of potential options to respond to the email. And I thought my daughter was being really shrewd and somehow programming.
Yes, I've seen this, yes.
Yes, that's Google's AI. Google is looking at the email message.
Do you want to say thank you? Do you want to say,
Yeah, and it's trying to come up with what it thinks might be possible responses you would have to that email. So rather than responding to it and having to type something out, you can, at a tap of a button, respond to the email. And that's one of those where, depending upon your perspective, this is either a hugely wonderful advance, or, boy, it's making the impersonal even more impersonal, where you don't have to bother to think about what your reply is. Google will figure it out for you, and all you have to do is push a button to pick the one.
Well, but there's relevance to that. So, but think about text messages. There's no platform where brevity and is worshipped more than in text messages. People won't even say okay. They just say
K. Yeah. Okay, thanks, bye.
And then how often is a response, yes, K, got it? You know, so being able to do that quickly on a platform where, like email, which tends to be more time consuming, more absorbed.
Yeah, I was trying to point out the downside.
Let's get rid of the niceties. You don't have to say, hi, John, how are you? Listen, I need to, okay, thanks, bye. It's like, here's what I need done.
Yeah, and there are contexts.
And that's what you do on a text. You don't say
there
hi.
are contexts where maybe that's valuable. Apple, by contrast, has made it so you can't text while driving. You know, that's one of the features that's coming in iOS 11.
Well, that's the nanny state. Come on.
Yeah, but
it's an option.
Yes.
They basically say you can set it so that.
Well, you can lie to the system and say I'm just a passenger, even when you're really the driver.
Like with Waze?
Yes, and every other GPS, depending upon the lawyers involved, you know, and
no, this is all hypothetical. Just be clear, this is all hypothetical.
No, I'm aware of people who have texted while driving.
Not us.
I could probably count on two hands the number of times I've typed a response while driving. I may have used voice.
Well, that's actually one of the reasons why I like the Hey Siri, because I'll hear a text come in. No, I turned it off.
Oh.
But I'll hear a text come in, and then while I'm in the car, I say, "Hey Siri, read message."
Yes.
And it reads the message, and it says, "Would you like to reply?" And I say yes, and then it says, "What would you like to say?" And I say it. It says, "Would you like to send it?" Done.
Yeah.
No, that's all a lot of work. It should be a much easier.
Yes, and so this AI-based response, you know, I think has some real interesting potential. And when I looked at the answers that it's given, you know, since then, you know, it's doing a reasonable job of identifying not only what's being asked of me, but what possible answers. It's not like it's giving me yes, yeah, yo, but you know, they're like, yes, I'd love it. No, can't do. Let me think about it. You know,
Right.
it's giving me reasonable alternatives.
So it should say, so when I get a message, it should say, would you like me to reply affirmative? Would you like me to send the location where that you're meeting? Because it should look at where we're supposed to meet.
Yeah, you know, but so, you know, I think.
I mean, that'd be an example. I'm supposed to meet you at the clock at Grand Central. And then we're on our way, and then you text me where we're supposed to meet. It could see in my calendar that there's a meeting and it's at the clock at Grand Central.
And that on our email thread, we talked about it. Yeah.
Right. Or a text or whatever on the channel that we talked about.
Whatever information is feeding the AI engine.
Right.
You know, so I think you look at what Google's doing with AI.
I don't want to talk to you directly.
God forbid. Yeah. We've got this hour to fill. You know, but Google's doing some powerful stuff with AI. You know, their AI engine just beat. It used to be the Japanese game of Go was the last bastion of humans better than machines, and you know, Google's deep AI machine beat Japanese Go champion, which you know is one of those seminal moments. You know, if you're looking for the moment when AI reached its tipping point, this well could have been it. So, you know, the stuff Google's doing with AI was interesting at I/O. You know, Google Lens, where they've had this application for many years called Google Goggles, where you can kind of point your camera at things and it will recognize and tell you things about them.
Except for that weird bug that you have in your house. Everybody has I can't tell you how many pictures on Facebook are of some weird bug.
Yes.
What is it? Anybody know what this is?
You've tried Google Goggles and it hasn't worked on that?
I don't know.
Yeah. But they're now going to build that into applications, which is interesting. Another AI experiment, auto draw. And this is something that I could have used in kindergarten, where if you try and draw a cat, it'll recognize you're trying to draw a cat and give you the option to make it actually look like a cat. You're going to miss the charm of your kids.
This is the nanny state again.
Yeah.
Now, you know, this is giving participation awards.
But it gives you the option, because you know I don't think all of our kids are that. You know,
I need to draw a cat because the goal of the exercise is not the cat, but it's because it's part of a big presentation I'm doing, then yeah, auto draw a cat for me. That's
Yes, in which case you'd use clip art anyhow, but nonetheless, it's an interesting. Yeah, is that an anachronism?
What year is this?
At least
This
they
is
didn't invoke
1975.
Clippy. Yeah, Clippy, can I help you?
Clip art.
And then
My father has books of clip that he used to clip out and use in when he used to do cut and paste.
Physical.
And he's probably watching.
Yes.
No, cut and paste with an X-Acto knife.
Yeah, that's what I meant, physical.
And rubber cement, absolutely.
Yes. Wow. All of these things from the Wayback Department.
That's right. I love the smell of rubber
and then
cement.
the other things, that I think were interesting. Google Assistant, its competitor to Siri is now available on the iPhone.
Yes, and I've actually used it, and I can't tell you how many times it said, I can't do that.
Yes.
And that's that walled garden that Apple's got, that I'll let you sit in the foyer, but you're not getting in, you're not coming in the house.
If it's any consolation, you get a lot of that even outside of the walled garden.
All right.
And then long overdue hands-free calling capabilities and so on. But Google I/O, some interesting announcements. Nowhere near as ballyhooed as Apple's non-announcements.
Since we are sitting in an enterprise technology space, and I do work I do work for a SaaS company that has products in the cloud, Freshworks. Shameless plug. This announcement was actually surprising to me on the face of it, but then you look deeper and maybe not so much.
And what you're talking about, Verizon sold its cloud business to IBM, and going back, and I remember consulting with Korea Telecom probably in 2008 or so, talking about why the cloud was such an interesting business opportunity for the telecommunications providers, who you would think, given their access to connectivity solutions, their ability to build large systems at scale, and there are a few larger systems at scale, communication switching networks, that it would be a natural for them to get involved in the cloud computing business. However, going back, perhaps forever, and there's been this schism between the comms people and the computing people. And
they were traditionally two different departments.
Yes. And
they didn't report to the same person.
Yes. So the companies had them separated. The vendors.
There was telecom and there was IT.
Yes.
And there were two different departments.
Yes. And guess what? While some of that has changed on the user side, at the very least, the reporting structures, on the vendor side, not a lot has changed. The computing people don't do, or the legacy computing people don't do telecommunications that well. And it turns out the telecom people don't do computing well at all. And more importantly, if you look at the arms race going on the computing side of the house with the cloud computing providers, Amazon, Microsoft, et cetera.
Facebook.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, Box, Dropbox.
Google.
There's some really big and deep-pocketed players making massive investments in the space.
Well, look, Rackspace, which was trying to be in, they realized they couldn't be in that business.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, and they had a lot of venture capital money, And the telecom providers, are looking at their investments in 5G and the need to continually invest in their infrastructure, and basically couldn't invest enough to be cloud computing providers. So it was antithetical to their mindset. They couldn't invest enough, and Verizon exited the business.
So moving on.
Moving on up. I'll stop singing.
Don't quit your day job. You have a job. What's your day? What is your day job?
This is my day job.
This is my
Today. Anyway.
So we talk a lot about autonomous driving, and you've mentioned many times that one of the keys to autonomous driving is hyper accurate mapping and mapping technology.
Yeah, I would say smart infrastructure broadly. That it's not enough that we build smarts into the car. We need stuff in the infrastructure because otherwise we're relying on cars to detect things that for any number of reasons it may not do well. And so there's this big battle going on in mapping, not to be confused with kind of the Google, what we see as Google Maps and Apple Maps and so on, but for high definition maps. And what these HT maps are is trying to map everything relevant that an autonomous car might want to know about. So the location of small objects, fire hydrants and so on, potholes, so that you want your car to be able to avoid the pothole in one way.
Or the curb, or
yes.
where the driveway is, or where the brakes and, yep.
Yeah, some of which can be detected by sensors, but relatively at the last moment, which might necessitate a decision to be made on the part of the car. It's like, pothole 50 feet ahead, do I swerve to the left and, ooh, there's a kid there, or what do I do?
Right.
Whereas if you knew you were approaching the pothole, you might do something differently. It's like, I need to move to the left, I'll anticipate it, there's a kid there, I'll slow down and move in line behind the bicycle. So there are a whole bunch of things that smart mapping can enable autonomous cars to do better than if they were just sensor-equipped cars.
So you got me curious now, because you talk about smart infrastructure. How much of it is up to the car to figure out, and how much is it up to the environment to tell the car what's going on?
Or other cars to tell other cars what's going on. That's something that is being built right now, that vehicle-to-vehicle communications needs a standard, because this is a system, and any one device operating in isolation, that doesn't recognize it's part of a system, can produce ripple effects that are not fully appreciated and unintended consequences and stuff like that. So, I am a firm believer that the infrastructure is the essential and primary element that is going to enable this kind of capability. But yes, we need to build stuff into the cars. But if we're saying all we're going to do is build smart cars that are able to do all of the things we want an autonomous car to do, I believe that is a failed effort. That we need the smart infrastructure to support and enable the smart car.
So when we're talking about the size of businesses, $1 billion is still a lot of money. $15 billion is an even bigger lot of money.
Yeah.
So Intel bought Mobileye for $15 billion, and yet I've never heard of Mobileye.
Right.
Why is that important?
Yeah, but that shows you the stakes we're talking about here at some level. That a relatively small and unknown company has that kind of market value. And as you might imagine, part of the reason why they're worth that much is there were more than one person looking at saying, wow, they've got some really nice technology and capabilities that are, fundamental enabling technologies to autonomous vehicles. And Intel, who in many ways is still trying to catch up and adapt to a world that is not PC-centric, said, this really is, if you think of what we, Intel, do, we create enabling technologies for people who incorporate in their intelligent products, that this is a path into the smart car business for us, and that's why it was worth $15 billion to them, because if you believe, as I do, that that this is the not too distant future of automobiles, which are hundreds of billions of dollars annually marketplace, investing $15 billion to be a leading player is a wise investment.
I don't understand. We're only going to need like 1 million cars because
of car sharing and. Yeah.
You just talked about what you call it, dormant use.
Yeah,
I think cars fits that category.
The only reason why that may not be the case, that car sharing,
because your car seat fits you just right, and you don't want anybody else sitting in it.
No. while true, perhaps, or more people don't want to sit in the car seat that I've sat in. But more importantly is those things work great, for normal loads. Labor Day weekend, where everybody wants the car, are they going to say, oh, okay, I guess I didn't get in first, I'll take public transport? No. So I still think car ownership is around for a while, but yes, car sharing is going to dent demand, but it's not going to wipe it out. That it's going to take a while for us to, and maybe the president will invest in the right infrastructure so that, we can move people around more effectively.
You say that with such confidence.
And what I think of the current president, but I don't think I've seen any other president,
right,
since President Kennedy, who invested in infrastructure to move 3 people, astronauts to the moon.
That was very expensive.
Yes.
Per person.
Yes, and that was our last moonshot activity. and we need a moonshot activity here to make this all work.
So all right. So moving on to we always talk about data, but one thing we've talked about here before on the show is do you actually own the things you buy anymore? Because are you buying an item? Are you buying the license to use an item? Are you when you buy a piece of software, you have the license to use that software. The company's updated, the company's changed, particularly using SaaS. But now it's actually we've talked about how it's happening with physical things, with John Deere.
Yeah, they've been the poster child.
You don't own your John Deere tractor. You own a license to use it for
and use it as is.
As is, and you're not allowed to change it.
Yes.
Caterpillar seems to have taken that a step further.
Or they've gone down a different path. And what Caterpillar is all the sensors that are built into Caterpillar vehicles and so on are reporting data back to the mothership. And Caterpillar now is creating a business that says, how is this data? How can I use this data and monetize it? So, as tractors are going around, maybe they'll be able to detect that if you plow in this particular pattern, you get better yields from the farm. But in effect, they're saying the data is ours. We are going to take it, aggregate it, presumably anonymize it, but who knows? There's a potential they might say, I'll send the local service bureau, Alan's farm is doing things very inefficiently. Maybe you can go in a consulting agreement, show Alan his data, and say, here's how you can farm more effectively or build roads more effectively.
I knew a guy whose business was...
You knew a guy who knew a guy?
I knew a guy whose business was, he'd go into a company, this was a decade ago, he'd go into a company and to save them money on their electricity, because if you have a lot of physical plant, the electric company was doing estimates about usage, and so he would actually, because they didn't have the data, so he was making money off of a gap in information. Now it's the flip.
Yes.
I'm making money off of having information that nobody ever had before.
Yes. And I think it creates some interesting customer-supplier relationship issues, who owns the data, but it also creates, this is one of the things that for...
Damn privacy again? Is that what you're going to talk
about? No.
Okay.
It's more, this is something that's been going on for 15, 20 years, and almost people have stopped thinking about it, but haven't fully realized the importance of it. What's the digital value of your business? And there are a whole bunch of people who think they're making products and haven't given thought to what the digital value of their asset is and how they can enhance the digital component of it and through that extract more value from the acquisition and use of the product.
You know, that it goes back to one of my primary theses, and this is the whole big data thing, is we have to learn a new skill about asking questions. Because we're used to having metrics and analytics hand to us because it's standard.
Here we had so little data, it didn't really.
And so, and here, if you want to know how well your business is doing, here, look at these 5 things, and that's how you get a sense. You want to understand your customers, here's 5 things you look at. But because of this massive data, we have to start to think about different, and that's a new skill.
And oh, by the way, this is not something that AI solves. It's like, oh, okay, I'll leave it to the computer to figure it out. You know, it's no better at coming up with answers if it doesn't know the right questions to ask. There's too much data for it to go through and see all of the things. And again, my politically incorrect example of 9/11.
So I'm predicting right now that by 2025, you'll be able to major in asking questions in college. I'm going to graduate with, and I say that, cheeky, but actually
There was just something in the Times or Journal this week about how schools are not creating people who are able to do that.
Critical thinking skills.
And being a liberal arts major, this is something, I fervently believe in the value of that education. And so I would agree with you. This is a skill that is essential, and we're doing a worse and worse job of training for it. But, along the data line things, it's also creating a potential conflict between the suppliers and users. There's a drone manufacturer who's basically saying, you need to update, your app that controls the drone to the new version of the app that enables us to do more data sharing. And if you don't upgrade to the new version, we're going to brick your drone. And these are like the $10,000 and up drones, that they want the data so badly, they're basically saying to their users, upgrade or you got a $10,000 paperweight.
And that's because you're not buying that's the Tesla story that I told a while back on the show, that you buy a feature where, this a friend of mine had a feature where the car would go up and down depending on the road because you want to get better aerodynamics, but they realized that it was getting too low, and so Tesla disabled the feature.
Okay.
But he bought the car with the feature.
Yeah, but the 7-point font that you clicked agree to, says they've got the right to do that.
Right. Although my favorite low-tech, high-tech story. What the Dutch did.
This is yours.
So for the NATO summit, the Dutch trained eagles to take down drones. That's just beautiful.
Yeah, and cost effective, because in the news this morning, I think we shot down a drone in Syria or something. And I imagine the cost of the operation to do that was probably $50,000.
I think that's a different size drone.
Yeah, I don't know how
big an eagle are you talking about?
Well, what does it take to take down the drone?
That's true.
Yeah.
No, I think they were talking about the small drones that the personal drones that people have with cameras and stuff like that.
I thought I think the reason why they wanted the NATO summit wasn't that were people flying over taking pictures, that they were going to do harm to world leaders.
Right, and I could manufacture my own eagles. Well, I need some some materials.
Tranquility Base here. Come on, complete the line.
I don't know.
The eagle has landed.
No, the eagle has landed. Yeah, you're gonna have to see. I'm much younger than you are, so I don't have those things. Don't stick in my head.
You were around for the Apollo missions.
In my cradle, maybe. But along with that though, the whole idea of drones is creating a drone can go in. You can put up a fence and somebody can't drive onto your property. or walk onto your property. But a drone,
Yeah, what are the air rights?
what are the air rights? And
Yeah.
the drones can go anywhere. Unless I have a shotgun.
And there are people who are doing that. Yeah.
Right. All right. Let's get to some of our quick bites. Some people call it the Super Bowl for the internet or Christmas for the internet, but every year, Mary Meeker comes out with her Internet Trends Report, and it's one of the, it's highly anticipated, it's highly reviewed, it's highly discussed, at least among the 3 people that read it or care about it. No, it's a very influential report. I took a look at it this year. There was some stuff. I mean, she talked about India, which is, we do a lot of business in India. That's where our team is. So that was a big deal for us. What do you think?
For me, there are a couple of takeaways. One, for a long time, the global technology sector was fueled by rapid growth of smartphones. That's been the most exciting sector, and in the last year, grew low single digits, 3%. We are reaching a period of saturation of the devices, and the market for, the replacement dynamic is a very different market than the penetrate new markets.
Well, you already see it here with where it used to be the telcos would subsidize it. They don't do that anymore.
Nope. I just went in the other day to see what was involved with upgrading my phone, and I have in my pocket here the last subsidized phone I'll get. That Verizon basically said, nope, no more. That your next phone, whenever you get it, will be one of the installment plan
and
phones.
you'll spend $700 or $800 on a phone.
Yep. Which is pretty amazing at some level when you think about it, because that's more, for the most part, than I spend on my laptops.
Right, but you use it more than your laptops.
Oh, yes.
So the cost per minute,
small.
But the cost per minute is so much cheaper.
Yeah, but the cost per square inch is huge.
But you highlighted here actually something that caught my eye too.
The online advertising?
No.
No.
This
yes.
is a big deal.
Yeah. Well, quickly, the online advertising. Another maturing market is advertising on the desktop. Almost all of the growth and investment from brands is coming from mobile.
But that's a North American-centric surprise. Outside of the U.S. and even outside of Europe, it's mobile first.
Yes, if not mobile only.
If not mobile only.
Yes.
Right. So that's not a surprise to the world.
Yeah. No, but we've been talking about voice. The thing that you're talking about, an indication of how mainstream it's gotten. About 20% of searches on mobile devices now are coming via voice. It's being broadly used.
Hey Siri, no, it didn't work. But I would also, just as a side tidbit, I dictate a search that then goes into, I'll hit the send on. So I bet you that number would go up, particularly on mobile devices, on how often you'll dictate something into it and then have that go.
Okay, Google, tell me about Alan Berkson.
No.
I can do a search for that.
Nope, I don't exist.
Please do. The drama.
No, you see, it's not loud enough there.
Or it's not voicing it. And actually, never mind. Bad example.
All right, so more quick bites. I love it when people use technology to solve a problem that doesn't exist. And when I heard this one, I think I actually heard it from you first. And so JetBlue has decided that they're going to use facial scanning to aid with the boarding process, because clearly the boarding process is the biggest bottleneck in the entire air travel process.
And it is. I mean, airlines, I remember when United Airlines decided, rather than boarding from the back of the plane, they were going to board windows first then middle seats, then aisles. All because if you can, shorten the time to turn the plane around, you can get an extra turn out of it. And if you get an extra turn out of the plane,
that's a lot of money.
Yeah, and this is Southwest. For all the reason why Southwest can do low fares, among other things, perhaps the biggest reason is they turn the plane quicker. Just get on, get off, and they get an extra turn out of the plane, more revenue per. So JetBlue is doing it where instead of showing your boarding pass at the gate, you can just walk in, smile, and walk on to the jetway. I repeat, walk on to the jetway, because we're now going to process people faster through the checkpoint at the door, only to find the line longer now on the jetway. They've done nothing faster to get people onto the plane. They've speeded up the part that's not the bottleneck.
If they could figure out a way to just automatically store people's carry-on baggage overhead.
Yes.
Like you just put it on a carousel and it just goes.
Yes.
That would be the biggest thing that they could come up with.
Yeah, there are so many. We're teaching people that row 20 is toward the back of the plane. When you see the number 8, you don't have to look and go, oh, the next one is 9.
Right.
But this is one I'm truly baffled about why they think, because there are those who think maybe it'll enable them to have fewer gate agents. But I've got to believe.
Go ahead. I was going to say it's not about. It's never where you think. It's like there's a computer adage, which is the problem is never where you think it is.
Right.
All right. So the advantage they're trying to do, what the problem they're trying to solve is not the problem we think it is.
And what's more, in 10% of the cases, it's going to make the problem worse.
Right.
So why are they stand there
right.
and it doesn't recognize my face, or United's implementation of it is just going to have the thing go, "You're ugly."
So why are they doing it, Doctor?
I don't know.
There's got to be some data.
Well, if you want to get into the nefariousness.
Which we do often.
Yes, that my ability to recognize who you are is both a marketing opportunity, where I may be able to recognize you while walking through the terminal and present commercial opportunities to you. And I consulted with British Airways on such an approach in 1993 or so. So, they've been trying for over 20 years to crack this nut.
I think it's just so they know whether to give me a Coke or a Diet Coke when I'm sitting in the seat.
There are uses, but none of it, passes economic scrutiny. It's either got to be because they think they can reduce headcount, and I don't think that's going to be realized through this effort, or it's a security measure, and that to me is a possibility. But if so, why is JetBlue doing it, not DHS? Or it's a commerce opportunity.
All right, I'm introducing a new segment. WTF?
Yeah.
And Pinterest is now valued at $12 billion in its latest round. What the? And I only say that not because I don't think it's that. It happens to be just a segment that I've never really.
You're guilty of being a male.
But you mentioned something when we were talking about for the show, which I think is probably the key factor in this.
Yes, and when I say you're guilty of being a male, Pinterest use is highly female skewed. And a common use case for it is picturing things that they might want to buy. Furniture, clothing, other things.
Decorating, right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the tie to that, from that to a commercial transaction, is huge. There's a bigly connection to this one.
I knew that was coming.
I had to, but seriously, that for a long time proximity to the transaction has been something that the internet presents, and there are commercial opportunities for it, and a lot of properties are valued based on their proximity to the transaction. That's like Google search.
And Amazon, same
Yes.
thing. Amazon, same thing. All right. Pet peeve. And this is only for you because I don't have this.
Yeah, that's because I'm an Android user. So I was flying out to California, and I went to, Amazon now has the ability to download videos. And so I went to load up my tablet with a bunch of videos on the SD card, get on the plane, connect to JetBlue's Wi-Fi, fire up the tablet, so that in addition to my email, I can watch the video. And it says, your SD card is corrupted. You need to reformat it. And I thought that it was a problem with JetBlue somehow, because the proximate event was my connecting to JetBlue's Wi-Fi. It turns out, no, it's Amazon. That it's a known problem that when you download videos to an SD card on Android, it craps out the SD card completely.
All right, so for all those people who use Android.
Yes, and there are more of those than
inside the United States.
Even inside the United States, Android has a greater market share.
All right.
Lower economic value, generally lower IQ with a few notable exceptions.
All right, security update. This one is hilarious. Hilarious in a not in a sad way.
Well, you may have even fallen prey to the latest ransomware attack.
Unless you were living in a closet, if you're in business or you work for a company, you've heard about this.
Yes, and there was a massive ransomware attack, and it actually got caught very quickly, totally by good fortune, that there was a guy, one of the security researchers, who's looking at the ransomware attack, and in it he noticed that the ransomware program actually had a kill switch. And the kill switch was, it went to a certain domain. And this way, if the person wanted to say, okay, I've gotten enough, or they're getting close to me, that they could shut down the attack, they'd go to the domain and look for specific information on that domain, and no further ransomware attacks would be launched. Well, the researcher noticed that the domain name was available. The ransomware creator did not secure the domain name for the kill switch for their ransom. So he registered the domain name, activated the kill switch, and the ransomware attack stopped.
All right. Interesting factoids. I'm going to start with mine. There are 2.1 million people still subscribing to AOL dial-up, paying for dial-up. 2.1 million people.
There's a side of me that wonders how many of them realize they're doing it. But yes, but that also points out that there are areas of this country that are underserved by broadband.
And that is
capability.
And that's the sad underside to this, is that there are the haves and have-nots in terms of infrastructure. All right. Shame on you. I think you've got to go with Congress.
Yeah, that's an easy target.
We'll just leave it at that. All right, we got a minute here. So
there are so many reasons, but the reason why Congress is considering allowing marketers to leave you voicemail, that there's an ability to call your cell phone without the phone ringing, and it automatically goes to voicemail. So they won't bother you by dialing your phone, but they will bother you by populating your voicemail box.
So the 3 people out there that still use voicemail, you're in trouble. All right, let's get a quote of the month.
Being as we're at Workbench, our new home, that I'll quote a quote from Aaron Levy, the CEO of Box, the file sharing.
Who's very quotable.
Yes,
He's eminently quotable.
Fabulous CEO too. He goes, in the enterprise, you want to start intentionally small. You intentionally start small because you'll not be able to compete with an incumbent because the incumbent is always going to go for the full solution. Start with something simple and small, then expand over time. If people call it a toy, you're definitely onto something.
That is fantastic. And actually, that is great advice for any enterprise software startup, because you know that if you're going into a space, you're not going to compete with the huge incumbent, but find something you do well. All right, so we are here the second Friday of every month. Our next show will be on July 14th, and we will be broadcasting again from our shiny new home at Workbench. So we look forward to seeing you next time.